She was wearing yellow. That's the thing that broke something open in my chest before my mind even caught up. Yellow dress, small white buttons down the front, hair pulled back the way she used to wear it on Sunday mornings when she didn't feel like being bothered with it. Walking out of a grocery store on Clement Street in San Francisco, a city I only happened to be in because my cousin Darnell had a surgery and I'd driven up to sit with him. 3 months. 3 months since I'd stood at her grave in the November rain and watched them lower a casket into the ground. I was carrying a paper bag with 2 oranges and a bottle of ginger ale in it. I stood on that sidewalk and I watched her. She was talking to someone. A man. Tall, grey at the temples, laughing at something she'd said. And she was laughing back. Not the polite laugh she gave strangers. The real one. The one that went up into her eyes. The one I used to wait for like a man waiting on rain in a dry summer. My legs didn't move. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the paper bag to crinkle in my hand without me noticing. Long enough for the world to go completely silent around me. Like someone had turned a dial and cut the sound on everything. Traffic, voices, birds, all of it gone. And there was only her. Vivian, my wife, my dead wife, standing 40 feet away from me on a public sidewalk, alive and laughing in a yellow dress on a Tuesday afternoon. She hadn't seen me. I should tell you what I did next. But first let me tell you what I didn't do, because that matters too. I didn't call out to her. I didn't run across that sidewalk. I didn't drop to my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I don't think. I just watched. My whole body had gone cold, and still the way a room goes still right before something breaks in it. And some part of me, the old, careful, quiet part, understood in that second that what I did in the next few minutes would define something about who I was, would draw a line between the man I thought I was and the man I actually turned out to be. I turned around and I walked back to my car. I sat in it for 40 minutes, and then I started making plans. I'm 81 years old now. I have a recliner by the window that I sit in most evenings. I have a lamp that flickers sometimes, and I keep meaning to get a new bulb for it, but I never do. I have a son in Atlanta who calls on Sundays, and a daughter in Portland who doesn't call at all, not since the thing I did, not since I did what I did to her mother, and the space that Renee's silence takes up in a room is bigger than anything I know how to measure. That's what I carry. That's what I sit with in this chair at night. Not Vivian. Not even the yellow dress. Not really. It's Renee not calling. It's the version of my daughter who used to leave messages on my answering machine, 3, sometimes 4, in a week. Just talking, just her voice filling up my kitchen. That version of her has been gone for a long time now. I took her from myself. I did that. I made choices, and those choices had a weight I didn't fully understand until I was holding pieces of something that used to be my family and wondering how to put it back together and realizing I couldn't. You can't always put things back. Some things you break, and that's it. I married Vivian Celeste Hadley in the summer of 1971. I was 28 years old, and I was working at the post office, and I thought I understood what it meant to want something. I didn't. I had no idea. She walked into a church social that her aunt had dragged me to, wearing a green dress and carrying a plate of something she'd baked. And I watched her set that plate down on a table and straighten up and push a piece of hair back from her face. And I thought, that's it. That's the whole thing right there. I didn't even know her name yet. I just knew. We were married 14 months later. We had 41 years together. 41 years is long, enough to know someone's silences, long enough to know the difference between the silence that means she's tired and the silence that means she's angry, and the silence that means something is wrong that she isn't going to tell you about. I knew all of Vivian's silences, or I thought I did. I was wrong about that too. I don't know exactly when things went sideways between us. That's the honest answer, and I've stopped trying to pretend otherwise. There wasn't one day. There wasn't one argument. There was just the slow, gradual thing that happens to two people who spend so much time being practical together, raising children, paying bills, managing illness, managing work, managing the 10,000 small acts of maintenance that a life requires, that they forget to look at each other. Really look. Not the looking that registers information, the other kind, the kind that says, I see you. I still see you. Somewhere in the middle of all those years, we stopped doing that. I don't blame only her. I want to say that clearly, even here, even now. I was not a man who made it easy to be seen. I was not a man who talked about what was in him. My father didn't do that. His father didn't do that. You worked and you provided and you showed up, and that was the language of love I had been given, and I used it fluently. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough, and I think I knew that even at the time, in some low place in me that I didn't like to visit. The last years of our marriage were quiet, in the wrong way. She moved through the house like she was being careful not to disturb something. I moved through it the same way. We were polite. We ate dinner together. We went to church on the first Sunday of each month, which was all she asked of me by then. We existed in the same rooms, without filling them. And then she got sick. The diagnosis came in the spring of 2011. Ovarian cancer, the doctor said, though they'd caught it at a stage that gave reasons for hope. She went through surgery. She went through treatment. I drove her to every appointment. I sat in every waiting room. I held her hand in the car on the way home when she was too tired to hold her head up. And I want you to know that I meant that. That wasn't performance. I loved her. I loved her through all of it, through the sickness, through the fear, through the nights when she cried in the bathroom and thought I couldn't hear her. But I didn't go in. I stood outside that bathroom door more nights than I can count, and I listened to her cry, and I didn't go in. That's mine to own. She recovered. The cancer retreated, and her hair came back, and her colour came back, and she started doing small things again, planting things in the garden, out back, calling her sister in Birmingham on Saturday mornings. And I watched this happen, and I felt the relief of it, the enormous, profound relief of her being alive, and I thought we would find our way back to each other. I believed that. Instead, something in her had shifted. I couldn't name it at the time. I see it more clearly now from where I'm sitting. She had gone somewhere during those months of illness, somewhere inside herself, and she had made decisions I wasn't part of. And whatever she decided, whatever she concluded about her life, and what she wanted from whatever was left of it, I don't think I was in the picture. She told me she wanted a divorce in September of 2011. I said no. I don't mean I argued with her. I mean I simply said no and walked out of the kitchen and went into the garage and stood there among my tools and the smell of oil and old wood. And I thought, I will not let this happen. I will not. Not after 40 years. Not after everything. Not like this. She didn't bring it up again after that. I should have understood what that meant. A woman who stops fighting for a thing isn't a woman who's changed her mind. She's a woman who found a different door. She died in January of 2012. A car accident, the police told me. A two-lane highway about 40 minutes outside the city. The car left the road and went down a hillside. The fire was substantial. They identified her through dental records. I buried her. I stood at her grave with Marcus on my left and Renee on my right, and I held both their hands, and I thought about all the things I should have said and didn't. About the bathroom door, about the 41 years, about the last morning, which had been an ordinary morning. Coffee, toast, a few words about whether we needed more dish soap, and how I hadn't known it was the last one. You never know which morning is the last one. I thought about that at her grave. I thought about that for 3 months. I got up every day and made coffee and sat in the kitchen and thought about it. And then I went to San Francisco to sit with Darnell, and I saw her in yellow on Clement Street. Here's what I knew in that car, in those 40 minutes. She had faked it. I don't know how you fake a dental record. I don't know exactly how you arrange a car fire in a way that gives them something to identify. I never fully worked out the mechanics, and I still haven't, not completely. But I knew. I knew the way you know your own reflection. This was Vivian. This was not a ghost. This was not a woman who only looked like her. This was my wife moving through the world with a man I'd never seen in a city 200 miles from where I thought she was buried, alive. She had wanted out. She had wanted out badly enough to die for it. That thought sat in me like a stone. I didn't go back to the store. I didn't try to approach her. I drove to the hospital and I sat with Darnell for 2 hours, and I talked about nothing. His blood pressure, a movie he'd watched, whether the nurse on the evening shift was friendly. And inside me, there was something moving, something slow and cold and deliberate, working its way through all my feelings like a man walking through a fire, looking for something specific. I drove home the next morning, and I started. I want to tell you what I did. I need to tell you what I did, because that's the whole point of sitting here in this room at this hour talking to nobody. You carry something long enough, it changes shape. It gets heavier, some weeks. It gets lighter sometimes, in a way that almost feels worse, because the lightness scares you, because you don't want to forget the weight of it. I hired a man, a private investigator, a name I got from an old colleague, a quiet man named Peterson, who did this kind of work and didn't ask many questions. I gave him what I had, the street, the store, the description of the man with her. I told him nothing about who she was to me. I said I was looking for someone I thought I recognized, and I needed to know if I was right. He found her in 6 days. Her name was Diane Holloway. She was living in a rented house in the Sunset District. The man was named Jeffrey Marsh, divorced, worked in insurance, of all things. They had been together, from what Peterson could gather, for approximately 8 months, which meant she had met him before the accident, which meant this had been planned, which meant there was a life she had been quietly building while she was still in mine, still eating breakfast at my table, still sitting in the church pew beside me on the first Sunday of every month. I sat with that knowledge for a long time. 2 weeks, I sat with it. And here's the thing about sitting with something like that. It doesn't soften. I kept waiting for it to soften, for grief to come in and take the edge off the way grief sometimes does when something's been going on long enough. But grief didn't come. Grief had already done its work. I had grieved this woman. I had stood at her grave. I had cried in my car in the driveway of this house more than once in those 3 months. The ugly kind of crying, the kind that embarrasses you even when you're alone. I had done all of that, and now she was alive. And the grief had nowhere to go. So it turned. I knew about the life insurance, $240,000. I had signed the paperwork and deposited the check, and barely thought about it in the fog of those first months. I had thought about paying off the house. I had thought about helping Marcus with his business. I hadn't thought about it as something she had planned for me to receive, as payment, as a kind of apology, or maybe just as misdirection, something to make it all feel real and final. I called the insurance company. I told them I had reason to believe my wife's death may not have been what it appeared. And then I called a lawyer. And this is the one I'm still sitting with. This is the one that comes for me at 2 in the morning and doesn't leave until the first light starts to come through the curtains. Then I called my children, not to tell them gently, not to sit with them and let them ask questions and hold space for what they might feel. I called Marcus first, and I told him in a voice that I recognize now as cold, colder than I've ever heard myself, that his mother was alive, that she had faked her death, that she was living in San Francisco with a man she'd been seeing before the accident, and that I was taking legal action. And then I sent him photographs. Peterson had taken photographs. Vivian on the street, Vivian at a cafe, Vivian and Jeffrey Marsh on what looked like a Sunday walk, the two of them close together, her hand on his arm. I sent those photographs. And then I called Renee. Renee had taken her mother's death harder than any of us. She was the one who kept a photograph of Vivian on her kitchen counter. She was the one who had, in the weeks after the funeral, gone back to her mother's garden and tended what was still growing there, because she couldn't bear to let the things Vivian had planted just die. She had stood at that grave and shaken in a way that made me feel like I had to hold her up physically, like she might come apart at the seams right there in the rain. I knew all of this. I called her anyway. I didn't soften it. I told her. I let the photographs do what the photographs did. And then I waited. The insurance company investigation took months. There were lawyers and depositions, and at one point I was contacted by a federal investigator because insurance fraud of that nature crosses certain lines. I don't know exactly what happened to Vivian after that. I know she was found. I know there were consequences. I know Jeffrey Marsh disappeared from the picture. Whether he knew, whether he was implicated, I was never told. I know there was no criminal trial that I was ever called to participate in. I never saw her again. I never spoke to her. She never called me. Sometimes I think about that she never called, that she was found out, and the whole careful architecture of her new life came down, and she never picked up a phone and called me. And sometimes I think, what would I have wanted her to say? What was there to say? And I sit with that, and I don't get anywhere with it. It's not the phone call I'm still waiting for. I gave up on that a long time ago. It's Renee. Renee, who I can still see, if I close my eyes, at about 7 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor doing homework, her pencil making that small scratching sound on paper. Renee at 16, furious with me about some rule I'd made, some curfew or some boundary, slamming her bedroom door in a way that made the whole house feel it. Renee at Vivian's funeral, shaking, Renee on the phone with me 1 week after I told her, and she said, I needed to grieve my mother in peace. And now I can't even do that. I don't know what I'm grieving anymore. And she said, you should have told me differently. And then she said, you wanted to hurt her more than you cared about us. She wasn't wrong. I've never told her she wasn't wrong. That's something I should probably put on the list of things I should have said and didn't. But the list is long. The list has been getting longer for 81 years, and I don't see it getting shorter at this point. Marcus still calls on Sundays. Marcus is like me in certain ways. He processes things quietly, puts them away, carries them without showing you he's carrying them. We don't talk about his mother. We talk about his restaurant, about his kids, about the weather in Atlanta. He laughed at something I said last Sunday, and it was a real laugh, and I held on to that. Those small things matter when you're old. You learn not to need more than what you're given. But Renee is like Vivian. That's the thing I couldn't always see clearly when she was growing up, and I can see it plainly now. She feels things all the way through. She doesn't process and put away. She lives inside what's happened to her. And what happened to her was that she lost her mother twice. Once when she thought her mother was dead, and once when she found out her mother had chosen to be dead. And I had delivered that second death to her, not like a father who loved her, but like a man who was burning something down and didn't particularly care what was standing near it. I have wanted many times in these years to call Renee and say something about that. I never know how to start. It's a particular kind of cowardice, the one that lives in not starting. In telling yourself there will be a better moment, a more prepared version of yourself, a version that knows exactly what to say and how to say it without making things worse. I am still waiting for that version of myself to show up. He is taking a long time. Vivian. Let me stay with Vivian for a moment, because I don't think I've been honest enough about her. I have been telling you this story in a way that perhaps makes her the one who did something to me. And that's true. But it isn't the whole truth. The whole truth takes longer to say, and it's less comfortable. She asked me for a divorce, and I said no. I said no, like it was my decision to make. And she had survived cancer. She had sat in waiting rooms and treatment rooms, and she had looked, I imagine, at her own life very clearly, in a way that illness makes you do. And she had decided she wanted something different. She had tried to ask for it the right way. She had tried to leave through the front door, and I had stood in the doorway. I don't justify what she did. Faking your death is not the answer to anything. It creates wreckage that spreads and spreads and keeps spreading, and she must have known that. She must have looked at the face of it and made a choice. Maybe she thought I would be fine. Maybe she thought Marcus and Renee would grieve and then heal and then go on. Maybe she just wanted it so badly that she stopped thinking about us at all. But she did try to leave first, and I said no. That's mine. I've had years to understand that. Years in this chair, in this room, with the flickering lamp and the small noises the house makes at night. All those slow, private years of just being honest with myself about things I'd rather not be honest about. I wasn't a cruel husband. I want to say that. I was not a man who frightened his wife or degraded her or made her feel small in obvious ways. But there are other ways to make a person feel small, and I use some of those without meaning to. The dismissal of things she cared about that I couldn't be bothered to care about. The way I could end a conversation just by going quiet, by shutting a door so smoothly that she didn't always know it had happened. The way I could be present in a room without being present in a room at all. She used to say early on that I was like water in a well, cool and deep, she'd say, and smile like that was a good thing. Later she stopped saying it. I think it stopped being a good thing. She wanted warmth. I had the capacity for it. I know I did. I can feel the places where it lived in me. The warmth for my children, for my cousin Darnell, for old friends, for strangers sometimes, that sudden openness toward a person who catches you off guard. I had it. I kept it behind something with her. Some old pride, some old fear, some learned distance I couldn't entirely unlearn. I showed her the well, and not the water. 41 years, and I never fully figured out how to let her in. And then she left, and I punished her for it, and I punished my daughter in the punishing of her. That's the shape of it. That's what I see when I look at it clearly, which I try to do, which I don't always manage. I think about the day after I saw her, that Tuesday in San Francisco, after I'd sat in the car and then gone to be with Darnell and talked about nothing. I lay in Darnell's guest room that night and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about what it had felt like to see her alive. Past the shock of it, past the cold that had come into me, there had been something else. Just for a second, just in that first moment, before my brain caught up, before the shock turned to whatever the shock turned to. For just that 1 second, it had felt like a kind of relief, like a pressure that had been sitting on my chest for 3 months had lifted. She was alive. She was alive. I don't know what to do with that. I've been sitting with it for years, and I don't know what it means about me or what it would have meant if I'd been a different kind of man. A different kind of man might have walked across that street. A different kind of man might have, I don't know, said her name. Let her see him. Let the two of them sit down somewhere and say the things that should have been said years ago, long before any of this. Let the truth have room to breathe. But I wasn't that man. I walked back to my car, and then I came home, and I made my plans. Marcus was born in 1973. He came into the world loud, which surprised everyone, because Vivian had been quiet all through her pregnancy, moving carefully, eating small amounts, sleeping a great deal. And then Marcus arrived like he had been waiting impatiently on the other side, and had things to attend to. He screamed and kicked, and Vivian held him and laughed through tears, and I stood at the side of that bed and felt something crack open in my chest that has never fully closed again. He's 61 now. He has a beard going grey like mine did. He called last Sunday and told me his youngest made the honor roll, and I could hear the pride in his voice. The same pride I felt about him more times than I ever told him. I wasn't good at telling him. I was better at expectations than I was at praise, which is another way of saying I was more like my father than I wanted to be. I told him I was proud of him a few years ago, out of nowhere, on a phone call. He went quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I know, Dad." And I wanted to say, "Do you? Do you really know?" Because I was not always careful about showing it. But I didn't say that. I said good, and we talked about something else. Renee was born 2 years after Marcus. She came quietly, unlike her brother. The doctor had to check her 3 times to make sure she was all right, because she just lay there, looking at the ceiling of that delivery room, with the most serious expression I had ever seen on a newborn. The nurse laughed and said she looked like she was already thinking about something important. Vivian said, "She takes after her father," and we both laughed, and I reached across and touched Vivian's face, and she turned into my hand like a plant toward light, and it was such a simple moment and so complete. I've thought about that moment many times, the turning toward. I didn't do enough of it. I don't know when I stopped. I don't know if there was a deliberate moment of stopping or if it was just that slow accretion of busyness and habit and assumption that happens without you noticing, the way a room gets dusty without anyone deciding to let it. Renee was my serious child. She read everything. She asked questions about things most children her age didn't think about yet. She wanted explanations, not just answers. She and Vivian had a closeness that I was adjacent to, but not entirely inside, a language of shared understanding that the two of them had developed over years of conversation, of sitting together, of being the kind of people who talked about what they felt rather than working around it. I respected it from a distance. I was glad Vivian had it with her. I understand now that I should have been closer to it myself. I understand now that Renee needed that from me too, and I gave her a quieter version of what she needed, and she took it because children take what they're given from their fathers. They build themselves around it. They spend the rest of their lives either coming to terms with the shape of it or trying to add what was missing from their own store. I think Renee has spent a long time trying to add what was missing. She's in Portland now. She's a therapist, which is the kind of thing that makes a man think. She works with people who have trouble with the things closest to them. She understands the mechanics of what I did to her, I suspect, in a clinical way as well as a personal one. That must be a particular kind of pain, understanding something and being hurt by it at the same time. I wrote her a letter 2 years ago, 3 pages. I wrote them at this table over the course of a week, several drafts, tearing them up, starting again. I tried to say what I needed to say. I tried to be honest about the night I called her and what I was doing when I called her. I tried to say, I was not calling to tell you something true. I was calling to use something true to hurt someone. And you were in the way of that. And I am sorry. I sent the letter. She hasn't responded. That was 2 years ago. I look at the mailbox sometimes, which is a thing I understand is not entirely rational at this point, 2 years later. But you look anyway, you still have the small daily hope of a man who has done something he can't undo and is looking for something to hold. Outside this window right now, the street is quiet. It must be close to 2 in the morning. The neighbors across the way have their porch light on, and it makes a small yellow pool on the sidewalk. A car passed about an hour ago, but nothing since. This city is quiet at this hour in this neighborhood, which is something I have come to be grateful for. The quiet, the way it gives you room to think, or gives you the option of not thinking, depending on the night. Tonight, I can't stop thinking. It's been one of those nights. There's a photograph of Vivian and me on the bookshelf across the room. I can't see it clearly from here in the dark, but I know it's there, and I know exactly what it looks like. It was taken at a cousin's wedding in 1984. I'm wearing a tan suit that I thought was elegant. Vivian is in a blue dress, her arm through mine, and she's laughing at something. I think it was something the photographer said, some joke he made to get us to relax. She's turned slightly toward me in the picture, just slightly, and I'm looking at the camera, not at her. I've thought about that photograph many times. I should have been looking at her. I have a version of that moment in my memory somewhere. I can almost reach it. The wedding hall, the smell of flowers, and something being cooked in a kitchen somewhere. The sound of her laughter right beside me. The warmth of her arm through mine. I was present in the room. I was just not present in the way that would have had me turning to look at her when she laughed, turning to see the thing that was actually worth seeing. I keep that photograph on the shelf anyway. I've thought about putting it away, and I never do. When Vivian got sick, I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. I understood how much of my life I had organized, without being conscious of it, around the assumption that she would be there. Not in a romantic way, in a logistical way, in the way that you go about your days, and all the background calculations of your life factor in another person without your noticing where things are, who handles certain things, the small familiar rhythms that you don't know you depend on until they're threatened. And when she got better, when the cancer retreated and she came back into the house in full, I felt that recognition, this person, this presence, this constant, and I thought, say something. Tell her what she means to you. Open the door that has been closed for so many years and let her see the water and not just the well. I didn't. I got up the next morning and made coffee and handed her a cup and said something about the garden. That was my moment, and I let it pass. People talk about regret like it's always about something you did. The thing I did wrong, the choice I shouldn't have made, the action I took in anger or selfishness or fear. And yes, I have that kind of regret. I have it in abundance. But the other kind is harder. The regret for the thing unsaid, the door left closed, the hand not reached. That kind lives lower in you. It doesn't announce itself. It sits in the body quietly, in the chest, in the throat, and it waits. She asked me for a divorce, and I said no. I've said that already. I keep coming back to it. I keep coming back to it because I want to understand what I meant by it, what I thought I was protecting. The marriage itself, the 40 years of it, some idea of myself as a man who didn't fail at things, some fear of what it would mean to be alone in this house. All of those, probably. They were all mixed together in that one small word, and I said it, and walked out to the garage, and I stood there among my tools, and I thought I had settled something. I had settled nothing. I had only made it worse. Sometime after she was found by the insurance investigators, I received a phone call from a lawyer representing her. It was brief and formal. He told me she was prepared to return the insurance funds with interest and that she hoped we could come to an agreement about how to proceed. I told him I had nothing to say to her and that any communication would need to go through my attorney. I never spoke to her directly, not once, after Clement Street. I've wondered what she would have said if I'd picked up the phone, if I'd called that lawyer back and said, let her call me. Just let her call me. I've wondered what her voice would have sounded like, whether it would still sound the way it did in 1984, laughing at a wedding photographer's joke, whether she would have said she was sorry, whether she would have explained it in a way that made a different kind of sense, whether there was anything either of us could have said that would have mattered. Probably not. Some things have gone too far for words to reach. I understand that. I understand it about us, and I understand it, sometimes, about Renee. But then there are other nights when I think, you don't know until you try, and you never tried. You sat in your car on a San Francisco street for 40 minutes and came home and hired a man and made your plans, and the whole time, the one thing you could have done, the one thing that was actually available to you, you didn't do it. You could have walked across the street. That's what I think about. Not even to forgive her, not even to rage at her, just to walk across and let her see you and let the two of you stand there in the fact of it, the impossibility of it, the total broken human mess of it, together for even a few minutes, just to have been in the same place at the same time one more time, as two people who had shared a life and then found their way to the strangest possible ending of it. I didn't do that. I chose the other thing. And the other thing had consequences I still live with. It's almost strange how quiet this street is tonight. I used to live in a noisier part of the city, and some nights I miss it. The noise let you feel like you were near something, even if you weren't. Out here it's just the porch light, and the occasional car and the house making its sounds, and me in this chair. Darnell died 3 years ago. He never knew what happened on Clement Street that day. He was still in the hospital when I saw her, and we never talked about Vivian, not about her being alive. He just knew I'd been quiet on that visit, quieter than usual. And he said on my way out, "You all right?" And I said, "Yes." And he didn't push it, because Darnell understood certain things about the way I was made, and he respected those things even when he disagreed with them. I miss him. I miss having someone who knew me well enough not to push too hard, and who cared enough to ask anyway. Marcus is good to me. He is a good son. But he learned from me how to be a certain kind of man, how to carry things quietly, how to show up and be reliable without always being entirely present. And so when I talk to him on Sundays, there is something in both of us that manages the conversation rather than just having it. We are careful with each other. It's a kind of love, that care. But it's not the whole thing. I don't know what the whole thing would look like at this point. Maybe this is it. Maybe this chair and this window and the small yellow pool of the neighbor's porch light and the letter I sent to Renee 2 years ago that hasn't been answered. Maybe this is what the whole thing looks like when you're 81 and have used up most of your chances. I don't say that with self-pity. Or I try not to. Self-pity is a thing I have always been suspicious of, in myself more than in others. There's a particular kind of self-pity that disguises itself as honesty, that puts on the clothes of reckoning without actually doing the work of it. I don't want that. I want to actually see what I'm looking at, even when what I'm looking at isn't good. Vivian chose to leave. That was her choice, and she made it. The way she made it caused real harm. It caused grief that was real. My children lost their mother, not once but twice, and the second time was in some ways worse than the first because it took the clarity of grief away from them. You grieve a person, and you build a relationship with their absence, and that absence has a shape and a name, and a grave you can go to. And then someone takes that away and tells you the shape was wrong, and the name was a lie, and the grave is empty, and you have to start over from nothing, not even knowing who you're mourning or what you've lost. That is real harm. But the way I told them, the photographs, the cold in my voice, that was also real harm. And I did that deliberately. I did not do that in a moment of shock or grief. I did that in the quiet and the planning of 2 weeks of sitting with it. And I aimed it. I aimed it at her through them, and they were the ones who took the impact. I have thought, more than once, about What my father would think of me. He was a hard man, my father. He came up in circumstances that didn't offer much softness, and he passed that on, as people do, as I did in my own ways. But he had a code about certain things, about protecting your children, about the particular responsibility of a parent to put the child before the grievance, always, without exception. He was not perfect at it. He had his failures in that area too. But he believed it. What I did with Renee and Marcus on those phone calls, he would not have been able to look me in the eye after that. I know that. I know it as clearly as I know anything. The lamp just flickered again. I really should get a new bulb. There's something I haven't said yet that I think I need to say. In the week after I came home from San Francisco, in the 2 weeks before I started the process of making everything happen, there was a morning, a Wednesday, I think, early, the light just coming in through the kitchen window, when I sat at this table and I thought about what it would mean to just let it go, not to forgive. I'm not talking about forgiveness in some large spiritual sense. I'm talking about something smaller and more practical, the ability to set something down, to say, she is alive, and she has a life, and I have mine, and the children are grieving, and I'm not going to add to that grief for the sake of a revenge that will not give me back anything I actually want. I sat with that for almost an hour. I could feel it as a real possibility in those minutes, the kind of man I could have been, sitting right there at the kitchen table, within reach. And then I thought about the Tuesday morning, the last Tuesday morning, coffee, toast, dish soap, and how she had already known, already decided, and she had sat there with me and said nothing and touched nothing and left nothing, and how I had driven to work that day thinking about something I needed to do at the post office, and she had gone to become someone else. That ordinary morning, that nothing morning, that's what closed the door. I wish I could say it differently. I wish I could tell you that I had a more elevated reason for what I did, or a more base one, something that made more narrative sense. But it was that, just the ordinary morning, the toast and the coffee and the dish soap, the way she had still been performing the life while the door was already open behind her. That was what I couldn't put down. I should have put it down anyway. That's the other side of it. Being wronged doesn't entitle you to wrong others. That's the thing I knew, even as I was doing it, somewhere underneath the cold, somewhere underneath the plans, and the photographs, and the lawyer, and all of it. I knew. Some part of me that was still a father, and not just a man in pain, knew. And I did it anyway. That's the weight of it, not the doing of it in ignorance, the doing of it in knowledge. I am tired. I can feel the hour in my body the way I can feel the weather now, in the joints, in the heaviness behind my eyes. I should go to bed. There's no particular reason to stay in this chair, except that sleep doesn't always come when I go to find it. And sometimes it's easier to sit here and let the thoughts run until they slow on their own. Renee. If she ever reads that letter, if she ever calls, I think about what I would want to say that I didn't already say in those 3 pages. I think about whether there are words that would do the thing I need them to do, which is not just to explain or to apologize, but to let her know that she was the best of both of us, that whatever she became it despite what I gave her, and not because of it, that the seriousness of her, the depth of her feeling, the way she looks at things and refuses to look away, that isn't from me, that's from Vivian, and I'm glad she has it. I'm glad she carries some piece of her mother that doesn't have anything to do with the leaving or the dying or the photographs. Something older and more essential. Something that was real. I would want to say that. I would want to say, your mother loved you. Whatever she did to the rest of us, she loved you. I know that because I watched it for 40 years. I watched her with you. I saw the language the two of you had, and I was outside of it, but I saw it, and it was real, and no amount of what she did to me or did to the idea we all had of her can undo that the love was real. I don't know if I would say it right. I have never said things right when it mattered most. That's a long pattern. Vivian used to say, early in our marriage, that I was a man who showed things better than he said them. She meant it kindly. She was trying to meet me where I was, but I think over the years she grew tired of being met and wanted instead to be come toward, wanted me to travel the distance rather than standing in one place with my arms out. I was capable of it. I know that now. I have done it in smaller ways with people who mattered less. I have made efforts for acquaintances and colleagues and friends that cost me less than they would have cost me with her, which is a particular kind of poverty, the willingness to be generous with everyone, except the person who most deserves it. She deserved it. She had bad options, and she chose the worst one. But she deserved it from me, and I never gave it. I think that's what I'm really confessing, if I'm honest. Not the phone calls, not the photographs, not the insurance company and the lawyers and all the cold machinery of what I set in motion. All of that is real, and I own all of it. But underneath it, before it, making it possible, I withheld from her for 40 years and then punished her for leaving. That's the whole thing. That's what I'm sitting with at 2 in the morning in this chair. The lamp is still. The street is still. Marcus will call on Sunday. I'll ask about his youngest and his restaurant and the weather in Atlanta. He'll ask how I'm feeling, and I'll say fine, the way men say fine, and he'll take it, because we've both agreed to take it from each other, because that's the language we made, the only language we made. And it's not enough, but it's what we have. And on some other night, some night I can't predict, maybe Renee will call. Maybe she'll have read the letter by then, or maybe she'll have put it in a drawer. But maybe she'll call, because she needs something only a father can give, even a father who failed at it, and I'll be here. I'll be in this chair, or in the kitchen, or in the garden in the afternoon, and I'll pick up, and I'll hear her voice, and maybe this time I'll know how to start. I don't know. I don't know a lot of things I used to think I knew. The night's gotten deep now, and my legs are stiff, and the ginger ale on the table beside me has gone flat and warm. Vivian used to hate flat ginger ale. She'd pour it out and get a fresh glass. I never understood that. The difference seemed minor to me. A lot of things seemed minor to me. The porch light across the street just went out. It's just dark out there now. Just the ordinary dark of a late-night street, the kind of dark that was there before any of us, and will be there after, patient and vast, and not particularly interested in any one man's accounting of himself. I should sleep. I know I should sleep. But I'll sit here a little longer, just a little longer, because once you sleep, it becomes tomorrow. And tomorrow I'll be doing something else, carrying the groceries in, or watching something on the television, or talking to Marcus on the phone. And this particular hour, this particular shape of the dark, will be gone. I want to stay in it a little longer. Just me and what I know about myself and the long-gone sound of a woman laughing in a church hall in 1984, and the weight of what I could have been, and wasn't, just a little while longer, just until the light starts to come.